So today I'm going to be covering invasive plants in your own backyard. And one of the things that I'd like to do is start by saying what an ecosystem is. And an ecosystem is defined as a specific area that's either water or land, and they are made up of living things such as plants, animals, and insects. So this usually includes water plants in a watery swamp environment, animals ranging from rabbits and mice. It can include reptiles such as snakes, lizards, all the way up to deer. Even your own backyard can be considered an ecosystem, and as well as insects such as ladybugs, dragonflies, stuff like that. But it is important to understand a little bit of the basics about a plant, and this includes going through the life cycles. So for an annual, you can see that a seed can be dropped into the ground, and as it absorbs the water, a root can appear from the seed. It'll take anchor, and the part of the seed also has its own nutrients, so the plant is not out of the dirt yet, so it can still have the energy to grow. As it comes around, the seedling will erect out of the ground with a stem and a few leaves, and from there photosynthesis will take over, where it is able to use carbon dioxide and energy from the sun to make energy to help grow the plant, along with nutrients and water gained from the soil. Now, that is in an annual plant, and from the nutrient gathering stage, the plant will produce seeds, and once those seeds are dispersed, that plant will die, and the cycle begins again. That would be considered an annual plant. A biennial plant, where is the cycle repeated twice. So it can happen in the spring, and it can happen again in the winter time or in the fall. And a perennial, the cycle is repeated many times, such as a tree, where it can go dormant for the winter and then come back through. Benefits of plants that we are aware of run along the lines of reducing nitrogen levels in the air, providing shade and care for the ground, reducing dust in the air, and then replacing carbon dioxide in the environment with oxygen through the process of photosynthesis. Now, we're going to take a look at what makes a plant invasive. One of the things to examine would be that it spreads, such as ivy growing over a fence or a house, such as in this picture. Another thing, a key note to take part of, is it'll be persistent. It'll easily take control of an area and is able to adapt to a new environment and resists efforts to get rid of it. Establishment is also very key in an invasive plant life cycle. It must survive transport from one location to the next. Now, this could be seen as a sticker getting caught onto your clothes, and then when you go home from being outside, it could transplant itself or fall off of your clothes into the dirt, and then the sticker or plant could start to grow in your yard. And it must be able to continue to live and spread in the new environment, regarding the persistence that I've mentioned before and the ability to spread. However, in the absence of competition, this is another key thing to look at. There's no competition, so there would be nothing to compete for water or sunlight. There would be no enemies either, as a fungus, such as in this picture here, where we can see the bugs eating away at the plants. And also, an indication and able to ID and help determine if this plant could be invasive would be the color of the flower when the plant comes to that stage in its life cycle, what type of life cycle, so if it's annual, biennial, or perennial, that will help you ID your plant, and also how the plant grows, the speed at which it grows, or things along that nature. So the impact of invasive plants, which would be the plants mentioned that would come in and potentially take over a certain area, they could determine the loss of native plants. So in your own backyard, if you have a dandelion, for instance, it was taking the place of the grass in your yard. For instance, it could be potentially poisonous, and that is not just to you, but it also could be to your pets. So it's very keen. You have to be very keen, and you have to be very, very aware of what plants are in your area. And of course, it can cause damage to the property. As in this picture, this ivy is growing on the fence. It could help rot the boards, or it could pull the boards closer together, or cause damage to a house if it was growing on a house. Now let's take a look on invasive plants that you might find around your house. One, as I mentioned, would be the dandelion. This plant is a perennial, and it takes about 3 years to grow completely. It is also determined as a weed, and the reason behind this is that it takes the water and sunlight away from the grass and or flowers that you or your parents have planted. Along the lines of control, the best time to get rid of dandelions would be in the early spring. Common methods include spraying with a common crabgrass spray or pulling, but you must be sure to pull the root from the ground. As we can see here, the long root right here is called a taproot and anchors that plant into the ground. In this picture, we can see the seeds, and I'm sure you like picking the flowers and blowing on them, but unfortunately that is one of the ways that invasive plants can spread, as I mentioned here. Another common example you might see are multiflora rose. Now these are a perennial as well, and they take about 3 years to grow completely and establish themselves. The reason I have determined them to be invasive plants is that they can come in and squeeze out the original plants of the ecosystem, such as your backyard, and this can cause lasting effects that last for many years. Now, in order to control these, they can be pulled, but they are a very tough plant and hard to pull by hand, and sometimes you even have to hook a chain up to a tractor or a pickup to remove the plant. Another method can be sprayed with a chemical, and this chemical stops the plant's growth, so the plant ends up dying, and then it is a lot easier to remove. An example of a multiflora rose would be such as this picture here. Today, we have covered what an ecosystem is, the life stages of a plant, and some benefits of the plants in our area. We have also seen what makes a plant invasive and what are the effects of a plant and some common plant enemies. Finally, we went over 2 examples of an invasive plant that you could identify in your backyard. Thank you. Are there any questions?